Florida has banned lessons on gender identity and sexual orientation in all K-12 public school grades in an expansion of the Parental Rights in Education law, which detractors call the Don't Say Gay bill. The previous version of this law banned the instruction of these subjects up to the 3rd grade. Now the bill will include 4 through 12 as well, students as old as 18. The new rule comes as Florida Governor Ron DeSantis travels throughout the first presidential primary state, South Carolina, where he's boasted of his protection of civil liberties in the Sunshine State.
Meanwhile, residents of South Florida are working to pick up the pieces from severe flooding that devastated parts of the state last week. Republican State Senator Marco Rubio spoke about the current fuel shortages the region is experiencing.
What's happening right now in Miami and in Fort Lauderdale with gasoline is crazy. You can't find gasoline anywhere. This has been going on since Sunday, and they're blaming it on the floods that impacted the port, and I know that was a factor, but it's been 4 days. This should have been figured out by now. And they're blaming it on consumer panic. Yeah, people are panicked because they got to get to work. They got places to go. And you either can't find gas or you have to wait in line for like 2 hours down the street where you're probably going to run out of gas while you're waiting.
Now, AOC responded to this video saying, "Sir, the they here is you. You work in the government." And followed up saying, like, there is no way the senator doesn't have the governor's phone number. Try calling him, find out what the problems are, call the administration, give people specific updates. Does she have a point there?
I think maybe she does. But let's go back to the, I think the part of this viewers will really want to hear about is the expansion of what has been called the Don't Say Gay bill. I wanted to reread what the actual portion of the bill is that pertains to this. It says classroom instruction by school personnel or third parties on sexual orientation or gender identity may not occur in kindergarten through grade 3 or in a manner that is not age appropriate or developmentally appropriate for students in accordance with state standards. Mm-hmm. So that would be expanded through grade 12. I mean, if it just said classroom instruction by school personnel or third parties on sexual orientation or gender identity should be age appropriate and developmentally appropriate, that would be broad, but I don't think, and maybe not a good idea because it's subject to misinterpretation, but I don't think maybe people wouldn't object to it as much. And it does say that, but then it also says the other part. So I think it's not a well-written bill, to be honest.
Yeah, and
you could just say it should be age appropriate, it should be generally appropriate. I understand. I don't know that this is happening, but to the extent parents have the fear this is happening, this was trying to prevent teachers in classes for young kids talking about gender identity and sexual orientation. This is obvious now. Expanding it to kids who are teenagers who are going to be more than capable of finding out about sexual orientation and gender identity, given their access to the internet and peer groups and everything. I don't know what you're trying to prevent here, because you're not going to stop kids from learning about this stuff.
So the fundamental issue that a lot of people have had is, one, they predicted accurately that the argument that this is about young kids who are not developmentally able to appreciate these lessons or being taught this, indoctrinated, etc. A lot of skeptics said this isn't really about young kids. And now that they've expanded it up to 12th graders, a lot of those concerns seem to have been validated. Moreover, because there are criminal penalties attached to violations of this law, a law that, as you've pointed out, is pretty vague, there are concerns that a teacher who, let's say, is gay, making reference to the fact that they and their partner went to the grocery store over the weekend, or a child whose parents are gay, if it comes up in class and he says, my mommies did this, my daddies did this, and another kid says, wait, you have 2 mommies? If the teacher says anything at all, that they could be subject to criminal penalties as a consequence. So at the very least, even if you believe
I don't think
in a law like
classroom
this,
instruction, but I concede that it's vague enough that I would understand why someone would be concerned about that.
And many critics of this bill have said there is a kind of personal discussion of personal intimacies between straight couples that has been permitted in classrooms. Mm-hmm. There was a viral clip of a teacher who hosted a faux wedding for herself, and she was getting married in real life, but her kids were really interested in what was going on with her, so she had a classroom wedding, and everybody participated, and the kids loved it. There was a lot of conversation around that viral clip because people were asking, well, what if I were gay and did this exact same thing in the classroom? People would be tearing their hair out that this was some kind of indoctrination. And so the question is, can anyone really make an argument that this is anything other than trying to have discriminatory treatment about the fact of gay people existing and talking about that in the classroom when the law is written in the way that it's written, and we have a society that obviously treats heterosexual relationships and that are in fact sexual relationships, discussion of those in the classroom as par for the course and normal, but any discussion of the existence of a homosexual relationship as somehow deviant.
Right. I don't really disagree with anything you just said. If I was trying to steelman, however, the case in favor of this bill, I would reword it to target what I think is more understandably objectionable, which is some of the teaching materials I've seen from activist groups, even for gender-related subjects that are clearly aimed at younger people, the genderbread man, some of that kind of stuff.
What's the genderbread man?
You can Google him. He's teaching kids about the difference between orientation and romantic love, and you know what? And if some parents don't want their kids being exposed to that, I think that is actually their right, and they should be empowered to have their kids in a school environment that, broadly speaking, engages in educational practices that corresponds with what the families want. And I do think they have that right. What I don't like is structuring the law in this vague way that could just threaten gay teachers, and that thus everybody has to abide by. I continue to think it's okay for different families who believe different things and have different political views to have different educational standards for what their children are going to go through.
It is interesting, though, and we saw this, I think you can see it a little bit more clearly in the laws that are trying to limit what is taught about race in America. It's a little bit less polarizing than some of these trans issues or LGBT issues, at least. There is this claim that it's about ideology. You can teach the facts, but it's about ideology. At the same time that you have teachers, there was that famous also Zoom call that went viral where a teacher was asking the principal, sincerely, am I allowed to say that slavery was bad? Mm-hmm. What is the line between there was slavery and we fought a war and the North won and slavery ended?
I genuinely don't know any conservatives who, maybe they're out there somewhere, who think you shouldn't be able to say slavery was bad.
Right, but that's not the question. The question was this teacher was talking to their principal and asking a sincere question in a private Zoom call that ended up getting leaked, saying, I just don't know. And the principal was like, I don't know. I also don't know what to tell you. This is all very confusing for us. I talked to a couple of math teachers from Florida, math teachers, who call into my call-in show pretty regularly, who said that they've just, because of the fear of criminal penalties for these laws, have just shelved books, are very hesitant to use anything that hasn't been thoroughly vetted. It's decimated the range of resources that people feel like they have at their disposal. And I do kind of feel like we're conceding a point a little prematurely. In other areas of academic discipline, we understand that we can learn about things that exist in the world without there necessarily being a value judgment. And it is interesting to me that we've all, in this conversation, we've kind of accepted the idea that the fact of people who exist in the world, who identify a different gender than they do, than their sex assigned at birth, is indoctrination in and of itself. And the fact of people who are gay and acknowledging that people are gay is indoctrination in and of itself. If there were a gay president, would we not be allowed to talk about their spouse? If there was another kind of gay public figure, is it indoctrination for them to come up in the room? If we talk about some of these, civil rights leaders who are famously gay, or musicians who are famously gay, or other people in history and class,
but let's
is that
flip that.
indoctrination?
Is it wrong for parents, maybe religious parents, to think that to want their kids to learn about sex from them or from their church or something, rather than from their public school teacher?
It's not wrong, and they can teach their kid.
Kindergarten teacher.
They can teach their kid about sex. They can't
have any power over their.
Let's not put sex. If the many people agree that there is an age-appropriate time to talk about sex, and that is when people are older, approaching puberty and having sexual feelings and potentially acting on them. And so therefore people should know before they engage in dangerous behavior what sex is. So that, I would argue, that gives parents an ample opportunity to be the first ones to talk to their kids about sex. This law initially was for younger age groups, and it just said make things age appropriate, which I think a lot of folks could agree with. So that's not really the issue here, right?
Yeah, I think instruction on sex and gender and orientation should be age appropriate, is not controversial, and is sort of what the bill says. Again, I would tweak it so that that's all it would say, and then there wouldn't be any controversy.
Well, I would also take away some of these criminal penalties, because God forbid you're wrong. And is it going to cause people to have this freezing effect? We talk so much about the freezing effect on speech that some of these laws can have. And I think it's pretty dangerous to tell teachers that they have to be walking on eggshell lest they be hit with an enormous fine on their very small salaries, or potentially incarcerated because they transgress, because a kid perhaps even brought up, because kids ask questions. Kids ask inappropriate questions all the time. And if a child asks you something in a classroom and you respond, even trying to change the subject or downplay it.
Ask mommy and daddy. That's the response that they should get. We got to leave it at that. More Rising right after this.